That 16-play, 95-yard touchdown drive by the New Orleans Saints in the preseason is just the tip of the iceberg of what this offense can be in 2024. We got all of that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert and credentialed member of the media covering those New Orleans Saints as a Saints beat writer over at LouisianaSports.net and Saints analyst over on WWL TV. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're going to go over our dog of the day against the San Francisco 49ers undrafted free agent cornerback Rico Payton. Really excellent preseason from the young corner so far. We'll break it down. We're also going to take a look at the Saints NASCAR package, those three defensive ends on the defensive line. We saw it a couple of times against San Francisco. What worked, what didn't, we'll break that down as well. And we're going to kick everything off with a look at where the New Orleans Saints preseason 16-play, 95-yard touchdown drive and what we've seen in training camp absolutely overlap in terms of what we have seen from this New Orleans Saints offense. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen of the day every day and for being an everydayer here on the Locked On Saints podcast, which is a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Well, the New Orleans Saints offensive starters, New Orleans Saints defensive starters were the most impressive part of their preseason matchup against the San Francisco 49ers. We're going to take a look at two themes, or rather a theme each from each side of the ball here to lead off today's show. Starting off on the offensive side. The Saints' 16-play, 95-yard touchdown drive was a promising drive. It was a promising moment, especially after two flat drives by the New Orleans Saints offense to start that off. And then, of course, the two not-so-great showings up against the Arizona Cardinals in the two series where the starters actually got reps. So how close was the New Orleans Saints' 16-play scoring drive to what we have seen scheme-wise in training camp? And I got to tell you, it wasn't even close. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. And this is a good thing, by the way. I know I'm saying it wasn't close. All those things sound negative. This is a good negative. The New Orleans Saints went into this game, according to my sources at least, not wanting to show a lot of their offense. And I think that they got out of it without having to show much of it. We did see a little bit more though, right? We saw the outside zone run, but I don't mind showing the outside zone run if I'm the New Orleans Saints. They're running the same outside zone plays in terms of tracks, pathways, blocking, things like that as well. Any team that's running a wide zone offense and running the outside zone run, there's only a couple different ways to run the dang thing. So that's fine. You're okay with that. Showed a little bit more motion at the snap, finally snapping the ball while a player is in motion. We see that all the time in training camp. I've only gotten to see it a couple times here during the preseason, but I think that you saw the value of some of those mechanics, some of those bells and whistles, the window dressing, if you will, I think is what Mark Sanchez actually called it on the broadcast. And one of the plays that Mark Sanchez broke down or highlighted that motion helped out is where I kind of want to start here. So this isn't a recounting of all 16 plays. If you want that, I'll do that as a film breakdown over for our Locked On Saints insiders. You can join with the description in the link, or the link in the description. But I want to just kind of hop around here. There's a rushing play near the red zone. Over on the left side, Jamal Williams, outside zone run, gets outside the tackles, picks up about 10 yards or so. How does that play work? How does that play happen? Well, it happens firstly because the blocking up front, which I think after rewatching not only the game, but having gone through the film of that 16-play drive and the earlier two drives by the New Orleans Saints starting offense, I will say I thought the starting offensive line looked a lot better in this game than they did up against Arizona. I think you would agree with that. So the way that this run works is because, well, the offensive line works, first of all. But the other piece is that they take a player in motion from the left side, spring him in motion on the right. He gets a full kind of running start as he goes through. The ball is snapped while he's still in motion. there's three things that then can happen with that player. Either you get a little bit of a split action release, play action, throw the ball to him, right? Or he ends up being the runner, right? A jet sweep or a shovel pass or something like that. Snap, shovel pass, boom. Or third option is that he's a decoy. And the decoy is exactly what he was. But because of those first two possibilities of him being either a receiving threat or potentially a shovel pass would technically still be a pass, but you get what I'm saying, kind of more like a jet sweep action kind of threat. That kept the linebackers kind of frozen for a moment, right? Held them in the middle of the field, which then with the handoff to Jamal Williams to the left side, he's heading towards outside the tackles. They're frozen in the middle of the field because of that motion. Boom, he doesn't have as much of a contest happening over to the left side. We also saw another moment earlier on in the game where Taysom Hill runs for a big 10, 11-yard run with 8 men in the box. How do you mitigate that? Well, a lot of that is the blocking scheme. If you're running to the left side, the wide zone blocking scheme says you can leave somebody over on the right side unblocked. And so when you have a fullback like Adam Prentice leading the way for, well, a fullback like Taysom Hill by the time it was all said and done, Taysom Hill, of course, got into the end zone on a fullback dive. But when you have your fullback plus your 5 offensive linemen, if you've got 2 backside defenders or 1 backside defender on the line and another backside defender up at the second level, leave them. Don't worry about them. That's not the gap. That's not where the run's going. As long as you're able to get the ball out of the backfield quick enough, those players that are left unblocked on the back end, they don't mean squat to you. Diddly poo. They don't mean nothing to you. So if you're able to get the clean blocks with your 6 blockers, right, your 5 offensive linemen and your lead blocker in Adam Prentice, and you can isolate to 6 of the 8 players in the box on the play side and wipe them out of the play, then you're going to gain yardage. And that's exactly what happened with Taysom Hill. So what's left, right? We just broke down some of the things that the Saints did, but how is that different from what we see in training camp? Well, in training camp, we see a lot more of that motion at the snap. Even when it came to the bootleg action, the naked boot that they ran, where there was a completion out to the right side by Derek Carr, it was a play that was reminiscent of stuff that they've done in training camp and not necessarily the same. Typically, there's 2 more routes also heading into that area that are a little bit more polished in terms of what that route is. And that's just what happens when you've got guys like Foster Morrow and Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed all running those routes for you, as opposed to, the Saints were down a couple players over on offense and things like that. And so I think that there's that piece. And the outside zone run piece, it's all of the things that now come off of that. The Saints ran 10 times out of that 16-play drive. 10 times. It was reminiscent of that Baltimore Ravens game years ago where they ran a bunch of times on like a 21-play drive, but unfortunately couldn't punch it into the end zone for that one. In fact, if I remember correctly, that was like a fumble out of the back of the end zone for a touchback that ended up going the other way. It was like the worst possible scenario on a 21-play brutal drive. But for New Orleans now, what you're looking at is, okay, how do they compound on top of all this? So with the outside zone run, you can pair within the same drive or later in the same drive that outside zone fake with the boot action over to the opposite side. Those things happened at separate times. But if you're able to build the run game through the outside zone run and then utilize that as the play fake to then look for more options, including that split zone release, that split action release by the tight end underneath the line of scrimmage, which you saw replicated with, I believe it was Olave going in motion and all those other things. Plus, utilizing other players in your backfield and things like that. There's just a lot more layers to what this offense can be with its scheme. Fully a part of what it's doing. So I'm all about what we saw from New Orleans in that 16-play drive, but I got to tell you, there is more on the way when it comes to this New Orleans Saints offense. Just hopefully they can execute it as well as they executed that 16-play drive and don't end up executing it as poorly as they executed it in those first 2 drives. Coming up next, I want to go over to the defensive side, because not only were the New Orleans Saints offensive starters impressive at least for that big drive, the Saints defensive starters were entirely impressive. And a big part of the reason why is because of their rush packages. Let's break that down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The same formula for winning championships helps to keep your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to be able to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always be able to find exactly what you're looking for at ebaymotors.com. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride the first time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts that you need at the prices that you want, you're going to be able to find exactly what you're looking for to be able to make your car an MVP and start bringing home some huge wins with eBay Motors. Keep your ride or die alive today by visiting ebaymotors.com. That's ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, family. The New Orleans Saints have absolutely found something on the defensive line, and dare I say the pass rush is going to improve in 2024. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day here on Locked On Saints. Next, go check out for your second listen, Locked On Fantasy Football. I actually had a friend, Dylan Sanders, was just down at Frost Stop in Uptown and actually saw Locked On Fantasy Football on the television in the restaurant. So shout out to Ted's Frost Stop. But go and check it out. Vinny Iyer and Michelle Majuk bring you everything that you need to know every Monday through Friday to get you up to date, up to speed, to help you be the smartest player in your fantasy football league. Go and check them out today at Locked On Fantasy Football, wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube. Also a proud part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I think the New Orleans Saints have figured something out over on the defensive line. Big shout out to the New Orleans Saints defensive line coach, Todd Grantham, who has done some really good work of making sure that these guys are playing to their strengths. It was one of the biggest things that I heard from every player that I talked to on the defensive line last year. What has Todd Grantham brought to this team? And everybody said he encourages me and allows me to be able to play more freely, lets me go out there and make plays, and builds my attack off of what it is that I do well. Almost everyone said some version of that language. And the New Orleans Saints defense has been doing this for years, trying to find that pass rush, trying to mix and match its rush plans in order to be able to maximize its ability to put pressure on the quarterback. In some years, they were not effective in doing that, right? They wanted the big defensive ends, not much speed. They're all about the power, second, third effort kind of guys. And then the coverage made the pass rush possible. Well, now the pass rush is kind of doing its own thing. And when your pass rush can be autonomous and your secondary can be autonomous, and now you have this really good core group of like 6 linebackers that all deserve roster spots, it's a pretty good sign for the New Orleans Saints and the trajectory of their defense, which looks like it's ready to get better in 2024 after being still good, but not as good as of late as what it was 2017, 2018, 2019, things like that. Not to say that the Saints defense has struggled at all or that it's fallen off or anything like that. It's just you've seen a little bit of a conversation about this team going from a top 3 defense to being a top 10 defense. Still good. You'll take top 10 any day. Not a big deal. But can you get back to top 5? Can you get back to top 3? Well, a guy like Chase Young certainly looks like he's going to help you do that. Chase Young was the single most fun player for me to watch during that preseason game in both of my watches, the live watch as well as the rewatch after the game was all said and done. And part of what makes him so exciting is just how quickly he can be a part of a play. There was the one run play that went to the outside left where he ended up going completely unblocked, ends up getting into the backfield, gets his hands on the runner, isn't able to bring the runner down. I believe it was Cody Schrader, the Iowa running back. I told you he was good, by the way. He was one of my big draft guys, or one of the big my guys in this year's draft. But eventually, other players were able to come back and corral Schrader for a 3-yard loss or so. We also saw both Chase Young and Bryan Bresee run the stunt game, using Chase Young as a bit more of the decoy in that situation, having him outside, stunt inside, and then having Bryan Bresee, who is also massively athletic, especially for an interior defensive lineman, swing to the outside and get contact with Brock Purdy as he threw the football. Almost ended in a Shamar Jean-Charles interception, but unfortunately the tight end for the San Francisco 49ers playing some pretty good defense in that moment. But that play, I want to make sure we stick with for a moment, because there were 3 plays that we saw Cam Jordan lined up on the interior. And there was a difference between how he lined up. He was either at the 3-tech spot, which is in that gap between the tackle and guard. There was also a moment to where we saw him actually at the 1-tech spot on a heavy right side or left side of the offensive line alignment, where he was lined up in between the center and the left guard in the 1-tech spot. So right there in the A gap. What we saw in those 3 plays: incomplete pass due to the pressure off the stunt by Bryan Bresee, a 2-yard run by Cody Schrader, and then a 13-yard pass that was completed to, I believe it was Latu, if I remember correctly, Cameron Latu, that ended up catching that one. Yes. And so that one didn't go as great, but that was also on a 3rd and 20. So you'll take the 13-yard pass anytime, because your secondary and your coverage, including your linebackers in coverage, are all playing deep. So it all worked. Every bit of what the Saints did with that alignment on the defensive line on the field that included Cam Jordan on the inside worked. And the other thing that was really exciting to see is that they didn't just do this on 3rd downs. Now, they did do it on 2 of the 3, right? 2 of the 3 were 3rd downs, 3rd and 11, which was the incomplete pass on the pressure and the hit by Bryan Bresee. And then the 3rd and 20, which was the 13-yard completion, which again, you'll take that because that forces a 4th and 7. Pretty good situation for your defense there. But the other time was a 2nd and 10. That's a rundown / passing down, right? We see in the NFL all the time. It's one of the least efficient plays in football, but the 2nd and 10 run, everyone seems to love it. And so the Saints getting out there and being able to make something happen with that. So this package of having Chase Young, Carl Granderson on the edges, and then Cam Jordan on the inside, and I think in each of these examples, it was Bryan Bresee also on the inside, it looks really good. And it's working. First and foremost, above all else, it works. And this brings a lot of athleticism. This brings a lot of opportunity for those stunts, for the opportunity to be able to really throw your offensive line off. I mean, even on that play, the 3rd and 20 that ended up in the 13-yard pass, Cam Jordan rushes up the middle and then just moves the center off of him and then ends up taking on the right guard by the time that it's all said and done. So he's just flying down the line. And it wasn't going to be much longer until either Bryan Bresee or Chase Young ended up getting through their left side of the line, if not Carl Granderson around the right side. So it all looked good in terms of what the Saints did. The only reason why they weren't able to get to the quarterback in that situation is because, again, the coverage was playing soft. And so Brock Purdy was able to drop it off to Latu, and then, the defense swarm tackle, 4th down. You'll take it. So I love it. I like it. I love it. I want some more of it. I love this for the New Orleans Saints. This is really nice. And this is another reason that you want to see the New Orleans Saints stay healthy, right? Especially over on the defensive line. And look, just because Bryan Bresee was the guy today, or yesterday rather, doesn't mean that you won't see Nathan Shepard in those situations. Doesn't mean that you won't see Colin Saunders in those situations. Colin Saunders, also wickedly athletic, especially for his size and his build. This is another dude that would be able to easily generate that interior pressure. And we saw a lot of interior pressure by the New Orleans Saints in this game. And I think that that's key, especially in a division where you have statuesque quarterbacks like a Kirk Cousins. And then you also have a quarterback that gets very kind of erroneous when pressured up the middle, like Baker Mayfield, and a short quarterback in your division with Bryce Young. Interior pressure works against all 3 of those guys. So if you're able to generate that, either with Cam Jordan in the interior or just being able to generate it because of the talent that you've now accumulated in the interior, all good. By the way, Christian Boyd, who did suffer an injury last night, seemed fine. Apparently, according to Jeff Nowak over at WWO Radio, put his helmet on, was ready to go back out on the field. The only issue is that he wasn't supposed to be on the field. So, you love how ready he was to get back out there with his team. So, Saints staying healthy on the defensive line has to be key going into and throughout the season. And of course, the next guys up, Peyton Turner, Isaiah Foskey, they've got to find ways to continue to contribute and make themselves known in there as well, because they could get called upon when it comes to depth or just snap counts at some point in a game. All right, coming up next, dog of the day. It's Rico Payton. We're going to break it down here. The undrafted free agent rookie cornerback vying for that 5th cornerback spot. And so far, Nobody's making a claim like he is. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints brought to you by friends at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You've heard us all talk about FanDuel a bunch, of course, as the top sportsbook in America, as well as our official sports betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. A great place for you to go to get in on the action. If you're like me and you don't mind betting on some preseason football, the New Orleans Saints are favored this weekend at home up against the Tennessee Titans by 3.5 points. They're also favored at home to open up the season in a couple of weeks against the Carolina Panthers. Maybe that's something you want to get in on one way or another. Well, now is the time to do it, especially before September 22nd. Let me tell you why, because the FanDuel's got something different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. $5. That's all it takes for a 3-week trial. Then, with a YouTube TV plan, you're going to be able to watch every regular season game on Sunday afternoon, all of those out-of-market games. All that you need is the Google account, a current form of payment, and then you can cancel any time. So get your 3 weeks in dip if you want to. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. I don't think that there is any player on the New Orleans Saints roster right now that is making a bigger claim for the final roster spot at their position than Rico Payton is making a claim for the CB5 spot in that cornerback room. We're continuing on here with today's episode of Locked On Saints with our look at Dog of the Day. And don't forget, we will be back with you tomorrow. The New Orleans Saints practicing at Ullman Stadium. So we'll have a live show Tuesday night and then a fresh episode for you as well Tuesday morning. We'll keep it rolling as we continue on here at Locked On Saints every single Monday through Friday and then some. All right, so Rico Payton has had an outstanding preseason so far. I don't know if there's a cornerback in the NFL that has had a better preseason, 2 games, than Rico Payton right now. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just a little bit closed off because my focus is the New Orleans Saints. That's what I dedicate my time to, including my free time. But I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a cornerback across the entire preseason, across the entire NFL that's had a better 2 games than Rico Payton. Rico Payton was targeted 6 times against the Arizona Cardinals, allowed 1 catch, broke up a couple of those passes. And when I say broke up a couple of those passes, I mean actively put his hand on the football. I don't mean got in the way. I don't mean tackled a guy so that he couldn't catch the football. I don't mean got his hand in his eyes. No, put his hand on the football. And yesterday, up against the San Francisco 49ers, by my charting, it was targeted another 6 times. Goose egg, 0 catches, and 4 times did I see him get his hand on the football. One of those targets wasn't even his guy. He just happened to be prowling sort of that left flats area of the field and then just stuck his hand in the dang play and ended up knocking it away. Rico Payton, number 36, out of Pittsburgh State, has had a fantastic preseason so far, and I cannot wait to see how he builds on it. Because look, when it came to his time during training camp, he was the jersey that was picked on all the time. Constantly gone after, constantly attacked, and to be honest, struggled a bit to maintain that coverage all throughout training camp. And then look, I'm removing things like one-on-ones and stuff like that, which are always weighted towards the offense anyway. It's fun. The competition is great. And when a defensive player makes a play in those one-on-ones, which Rico Payton did have a couple of those moments, you love it. And you love to see that for defenses. But outside of that, what happened in team drills, 7-on-7s, things like that, like Rico Payton got picked on quite a bit. And I love the fact that he took all of that, all the being picked on, the struggles that he had early on in training camp, all that, and now he's turned that into what has been, I still think, the best cornerback performance across the league in the first 2 preseason games. It's absolutely outstanding. Absolutely outstanding. And so, on top of that, what you're looking for now is not a guy that has to be a starter. Not a guy that's got to come in and be one of your lockdown outside corners or anything like that. You're looking at a guy right now who is making a claim for the 5th cornerback spot, safely set up behind Marshon Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, Kool-Aid, McKinstry, and Alontae Taylor. And it's probably Alontae Taylor and then Kool-Aid McKinstry is the appropriate order for that, because Alontae is going to be your starting slot corner, because he's also been, and I don't use this word often, but I do mean it, very good. Sorry, that was for me. It has been very good over the course of the training camp, preseason, all that. I mean, you saw Alontae Taylor last night out there making plays, took away a corner route entirely because he simply ran the route for the wide receiver. And so the ball ended up getting hung up, and Will Harris, who was an interesting decision to start next to Tyrann Mathieu at safety, by the way, we'll look at that later on this week, almost got a diving interception off of it because Alontae Taylor said, you're not running that route. That's mine. I got this. So you love what you're seeing from this New Orleans Saints secondary. At least I do. I hope you do too. And Rico Payton's been a big part of that. So can he win that fifth cornerback spot? Can he be the guy that is solid depth for this team, that maybe can surprise some folks if he goes out there and has to play? Because the New Orleans Saints, as we've discussed before, are not going to be able to keep all three of their starting cornerbacks healthy. No team in the NFL will. It's unrealistic to expect. So Rico Payton, being the fifth cornerback, would probably see a little bit of playing time, whether that's coming in as a dime back, whether it's coming in as one of the starting guys on the outside, or having to play in the slot. He's got the composure, he's got the attitude, he's got the confidence, and he's got, most importantly, the short memory to get it done. And that's all you need from a guy like that. And he can contribute for you on special teams, all that. He could be, and I want to say this very carefully because I don't want to overinflate and create like a larger expectation than is necessary, but he could effectively be what the New Orleans Saints intended to have in Isaac Yiadom before Isaac Yiadom turned into one of the better starting corners in the NFL out of nowhere in 2023, and deservingly went off and got a job actually with those San Francisco 49ers that Rico Payton excelled again against last night. So could he be somebody that ends up taking that fifth cornerback spot? Because really the conversations between him, Shamar Jean-Charles, and Rajon Wright. And Rajon Wright looked really good last night too. He had a really nice showing. Shamar Jean-Charles almost ended up with that interception on that Bryan Bresee pressure. Unfortunately, San Francisco's offense playing really good defense in that moment. But Rico Payton right now is the guy that I don't think, even with strong performances by those other corners, I don't think you can say that there's a corner that has performed better than Rico Payton has. And that includes guys like Kool-Aid McKinstry. Not to say that Kool-Aid McKinstry performed poorly. I'm just saying Rico Payton has been that good. Kool-Aid McKinstry, by the way, did leave the game early with an injury last night. According to Dennis Allen, though, they avoided serious injury. He should be fine. So we'll see where things go, how quickly he can get back out there. I would not be surprised to not see him until either later on in the week, this week at practice, or maybe not at all during practice and that preseason game against the Tennessee Titans next weekend. You ain't got to learn nothing about Kool-Aid McKinstry. You already know he's on your team. He's a lock for your roster anyway. Doesn't matter, right? So I could see them being just as cautious with him as they've been with Marshon Lattimore, Paulson Adebo, Pete Werner, Demario Davis, so on and so forth, because he's just as important to your depth as those guys are to your starting roles, and may end up having to step into a starting role at some point. But you know he's going to be on your roster, so no need to push it. The other thing that's been really interesting to see is people who have asked me about Rico Payton potentially playing safety. Oh, could he move to safety? Could he move to safety? I don't know. I have no idea. I don't think the Saints should even try to find that out, though. I mean, if you do that during the third preseason game because you're low on numbers, because I assume that most starters won't touch the field for the Saints against the Tennessee Titans, I think some will. I could see Trevor Penning playing. I could see, who, by the way, I thought was vastly improved against San Francisco 49ers in the game that he played against the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to break that down later on this week as well. We got a lot to look at from this game. And of course, insiders will get a film study on that as well. But then, Taliese Fuanga, if he's back with the team and he's able to get started with them again here throughout practices this week, I could see him playing in the preseason game against the Tennessee Titans. I wouldn't be shocked by that. Maybe Lucas Patrick, who is still kind of locking down that left guard role, although I can't imagine anybody's actually competing with him at this point. I could see that too. But outside of that, I don't imagine a lot of starters will play. So numbers-wise, you might have to see Rico Payton play another position. But I got to say this. If a guy is excelling where he's at, keep him where he's at. And then figure out that other position another way. Don't end up moving somebody out of where they're strongest just for the sake of getting a body and some talent in a position that body and that talent might not play as well in. I would rather you not find that out than try to find that out. Keep Rico Payton where he is because he is absolutely balling out. He was 100% the dog of the day up against San Francisco. We appreciate you very much for coming through for another episode of Locked On Saints. Before your day is over, make sure you go and check in with our great friends, Jake Madison over at Locked On Pelicans and Matt Moscona, my wonderful teammate over at LouisianaSports.net, by checking out his Locked On LSU podcast, because LSU cleaning up in recruitments yet again. We appreciate you very much. As always, make Locked On Saints a part of your day, part of your routine, for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure that you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. And trust Who Dat Nation. I'll holla at you.